Okay. Viola, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Biola JJ. Pronouns are she, her. I'm the Mid Atlantic Regional Communications Director at the Working Families Party, and I'm based in Washington, D.C.
Hi, I am Erica Person. I am the Senior Digital Strategist uh, in the Criminal Justice Department at the Working Families Party. I am based out of Brooklyn. My pronouns are she, her. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat if you're just entering the room. Would love to know your name, your pronoun, what you're doing right now, how you came to campaigning, whatever you feel like, sharing. Okay, so before we get started, this is a digital and communications training. I'm going to be taking the first section, which is digital. It should run about 20 minutes. Viola is going to take the next section on sort of messaging and comms. This is a 201 level, so we're hoping that y'all are coming to this with just a basic knowledge of how to navigate Facebook and how to navigate, kind of what a press advisory and press release is, and we're going to talk a little bit about like strategy and how to actually build out your campaigns. But before we dive into that, just wanted to take a moment to ground us in why we're doing this. This training is specifically for women, trans, and queer folks. And the reason that we do this was born out of an article that was in 2018 by our friend Erica Sagrins. Um, and she wrote an article called More Women Should Be Campaign Managers. And that's because campaign culture is really set from the top. And if you've ever worked on a campaign before, you know that it can be very difficult for marginalized identities because the cishet white bro culture is super real. A lot of times, campaigns are people who work on campaigns are not paid enough. There it requires a lot of relocation, and it is just not accessible to people who have disabilities, to people who are parents to and are taking on the brunt of like childcare, which is of course mostly women. It is not a lot of times accessible to people with just in general marginalized identities because the structure does not consider those identities. So women run campaigns. The name doesn't exactly represent what the mission was going out to do, but it's really for trying to create a space specifically for those people, for every kind of marginalized identity to go and be empowered to run a campaign. So today, usually these trainings run anywhere between a day and 2 days, and we cover campaign management, we cover digital, we cover comms, we cover field, cover fundraising. Viola and I are giving a very short version of the digital and comms, a very condensed version of the digital and comms training. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to look through these things. A lot of things that you're going to deal with on campaigns is, you don't get orientation, you don't get HR. Things are really, really informal. There's a really informal culture, which can make things seem more permissive than they actually are. There is a party culture on campaigns. It's often a lot of young people. There's a lot of drinking that can make people extremely uncomfortable. And we wanted to create a space that kind of deconstructed those things so we could learn in community together. It's a little bit more difficult on a virtual space, which is why I really encourage you to use the chat, share your stories, and try and create as much community as possible in the virtual space. But, again, when Viola and I used to do these trainings back in the day when we had in-person trainings, it was a really special and beautiful place for people to feel empowered and feel like we could rise up in the ranks of campaigning and had the hard skills to do that and really beat imposter syndrome. So that's really what we're aiming to do today. So let's get down to brass tacks. Just like a digital 101 on like how we are going over, it's really a 201 because, we want to come with the basic, like I said, the basic skills in order to understand where I'm coming from with a lot of what I'm about to talk about. My email is eperson@workingfamilies.org. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out directly. Okay, so I'm sure you're familiar with all the tools that you have at your disposal to build out your digital campaign, but it's very difficult to figure out which of these tools is going to work for you and work for your campaign. So, in starting to build out your digital campaign as a digital director, the three things that you're going to want to do is, and this slide, it bookends it, just bookends kind of this agenda. You're going to want to assess and research, and I'm going to go over that in just in a second. After you assess and research, you are going to create a way to share your assessment and the research of how you decided what platforms you're going to use and why. You're going to start to build that out. And then you're going to start engaging people on the platforms. And the way that you do that is through essentially list building. We're going to talk about that in a minute. The key principles of digital that you want to keep in mind is integrating it with your campaign plan. I'm going to talk about more what that means. Raising money. We run progressive campaigns. Grassroots fundraising is extremely important, and digital is the widest funnel to start that with. And then looking for opportunities to increase your engagement. So step one, assess your resources and do your research. Number one thing you want to do on your campaign is assess your capacity. You might be the only digital staffer on a release. It depends what kind of campaign you're running, but you might be the only digital staffer. You actually might be the campaign manager and not have a digital director yet, and will have to be running the digital. So that is, that in combination with your budget is going to really because your platforms are going to be contingent on what capacity you have and what your budget looks like. The third thing that you want to consider, if you have to be extremely choosy and you can't operate from a place of abundance in drawing out your digital program, is where are your voters? So in choosing platforms, and I say this, like, if you can't operate from a place of abundance, like, it would be amazing, right? If every campaign could have an Unreal digital game on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and TikTok and like send out a very strong segmented email and a text and like all of the things, right? But that's not always the reality of the situation. A lot of times you're going to have to think about where your voters are and you're going to have to choose your platforms wisely, especially if you don't have the capacity to, as I mentioned here, if you don't have the capacity, if you're the only person running digital, you don't have the capacity to do all these things. So just to run through them a little bit, Facebook is really the most standard first choice platform, and I do recommend running ads. Happy if anyone has any questions about the business manager, feel free again to email me directly. It is truly a labyrinth of things to navigate, and trying to figure out the disclaimers that you need, especially in regard to compliance, can be very difficult, and time consuming, and I'm happy to help you walk you through that process. But I want to take more of a broad-based approach to digital here, and that is extremely nuanced and detailed, and unfortunately so, because it shouldn't be that hard. I do recommend running ads when you, as a digital director, as a campaign manager, spending like $10 a day, $100 a week when you're first starting your campaign, build up engagement, list build, and just really keep targeting people that, you think are going to be in your base. Twitter is the second one I would recommend you go on. You don't have to, like I say here, you should be meeting minimum frequency. Minimum frequency on Twitter does not have to be that often. It can be, especially before GOTB, um, one tweet every few days if it's a small campaign. And you should be using Twitter to engage journalists, talk about what's in the news, and basically share the earned media that is coming out, the positive earned media that is coming out about you. Um, so it is also where a lot of journalists and politicos kind of live. A lot of political influencers, for lack of a better word, live. So it is a smart idea to be on that, because you're then becoming, even if you're not actively always participating as like the person who is setting culture as part of the conversation, you're still on there and someone can still tag you or DM you if they need to. Um, Instagram is definitely for a younger audience. We're talking not even necessarily 18, but we are looking like 20 to 30-year-olds here. It's a very visual platform. Things are starting to pick up pace a little bit again, with, all things considered with the pandemic. But when I was giving this training uh, last year, I really discouraged people from operating on Instagram unless they did have they had to turn out young people, um, because it's so visual. And if you don't have a lot going on, like pictures or videos, then it's not a super engaging platform. Graphics don't really perform well. TikTok is super time consuming. So if you are trying to turn out Gen Z specifically and really focusing on young voters, college age voters, TikTok is a good platform for that. But it takes a long time to edit videos and to curate it really well. The alternative for all of these is something that is very persuasive, which is a straight to camera video from your candidate, or really from any validator. Uh, that video is prioritized in almost all of these algorithms except for Twitter. And obviously TikTok is only video. So creating videos that are straight to camera is pretty, and just like holding your iPhone like this and like talking to it, you can run ads on that. You can put that on Facebook. You can put it on Instagram. You can put it on Instagram stories. And it is a really quick and dirty way to make content that usually tends to do pretty well, especially if you're going to make a fundraising ask. So just wanted to run through those platforms. Some of the other ones, which I'm going to go over in a minute, are kind of non-negotiable. Step 2, create a way for voters to find out about your candidate and plug in. So, okay, you've decided that you're going to go on Facebook. You decided you're building a site. Sometimes people, I don't encourage this, but I've seen it done before. People don't build a website. They just have a Facebook page, especially for smaller municipal races. I don't think that's a great idea because Facebook does not do fundraising for PACs, for candidates. It only does C3 fundraising in terms of like not leaving Facebook. So the amount of navigation that you have in order to leave Facebook and then get to like ActBlue, right? It's more clicks and it just discourages people to actually follow through and donate. So I would suggest having a website where also everything is there. You also might be able to, have your events there, have a feed already embedded in there so people can sign up on the website, have the donation embedded in the website so people don't have to leave the website there. If you do use a Facebook page, ultimately it's fine for like a small municipal race. It's just not ideal. Some key elements I have here, and this also applies, I'm sure Beulah will go into this, to like direct mail. right? You need to have your name, the office you are running for, the election date. Like really need to have that there. If there is information about early vote, if you could have it somewhere on the front page of the website or the cover photo, that would be ideal. You should have also bio, top issues. Your bio should be like only a few paragraphs. Um, Top issues can be a little bit longer, like what are issues, Donate and volunteer links. I really think that donate and volunteer links, this is a personal preference, should be next to each other on the website, because sometimes you'll see like a huge donate button and then like a really small volunteer button or like tab. And I just don't think, for me personally, I think it speaks more to the values of the candidate if you are considering like time donated as valuable and like on even footing as dollars donated, because it is, and like sometimes even more so, right? An hour, someone making phone calls for an hour is extremely valuable, and maybe goes a little bit further than donating $5. um, some tools you can use to create a quick and dirty website. Squarespace is super easy if you have some digital knowledge, and only like requires very light HTML, if at all, to do some things that are slightly more advanced, but you really don't even need it. WordPress is a little bit harder. Wix is okay, not my favorite. And then of course I gave the why there's an asterisk there for Facebook. It is obviously really easy to create, but not super customizable, and not good for not good for donations or fundraising. Last thing I'll say about this slide is please have your candidate invest in good photos. As someone who has created like truly 4 million endorsement graphics in my lifetime, I cannot tell you the amount of times that I have Google imaged a candidate or gone to their Twitter. This is again why Twitter is important. And their photo has been grainy, or it's been like a crop photo of just like a normal photo of them. Please, even if it's just like an iPhone photo, um, make sure there's good lighting, make sure they're wearing something professional or matches the vibe of the campaign, and it's a good photo of their face, because people are going to be pulling from the Facebook, from the website, from the, especially probably from the Twitter, whatever the icon is. They're going to be pulling that photo, especially people who are trying to run IEs for your candidate, and cannot talk to coordinate with the campaign. And so having just like a bank of good photos available for those folks' disposal will just create more money for you and better content for you in the long run. Step 3, build a supporter list and communicate. So you got your website, you have your platforms, you figured it all out. Now you need to develop how you are going to disseminate like your program, and how you are going to build your list up. Like a website is only so good until people go and visit it. So I'm going to go through a few channels for broadcast, right? Especially more targeted broadcast to a specific list, your list of supporters. Email is pretty standard. Unfortunately, even though it has like, this is a very rough estimate, 15 to 20%. Sometimes it's way lower if you have a bigger list. Sometimes it's way higher if you have a very segmented list and you're sending it out to like a specific county and it's a county specific event, right? Or a specific town and it's a town specific event, or it's like a event specifically for Spanish speakers, and you have tagged that you have that tagged and segmented in your CRM. So this open rate totally varies, and like it's almost such an average that it's meaningless. But I wanted to put it out there just to give you an idea that you're not going to get like a 70% open rate on every email. Your email program though is like the most useful way to do some grassroots fundraising, to have huge campaign announcements. Press will be on your list, as will your opponents likely. And just like updates about your campaign. It is a way to keep people involved and engaged. The ones I would recommend: Action Network, Nation Builder is fine, and MailChimp. MailChimp is the easiest, and I think Action Network is the best CRM. You're going to build your list through sign-in forms, petitions, things of that nature. All right, I'm realizing I need to pick up the pace a little bit, so I'm just going to run through these. Broadcast SMS, I'm sure you've heard of this. The difference here is that you have to actually opt in, so that's why you'll see text Bernie to 82623 versus peer-to-peer, which is a great opportunity for list building because you can dump in your entire van list or whatever you're using to knock doors, like a Votivate, anything like that. And you can dump in your entire list, and no spam filter. There should be really an asterisk there. Like, companies and carriers are really cracking down on this, but it is a really good way to start getting some IDs. Facebook Messenger is fine. It is something that you can do with ads, but it is not the most effective way for either IDing or getting positive IDs, or even necessarily acquisition, because like my page is really, it's being phased out of Facebook. And it's a pretty useless metric regardless, but I did want to just include it because it is an option. Okay, so the key principles. The number one thing that I do want to stress here is digital, despite it being pandemic, despite it being COVID, despite face-to-face being especially challenging right now, is not a replacement for field. It is, however, a tool that you integrate with your campaign plan. Digital organizing, traditional digital and digital organizing are kind of becoming in this Venn diagram with field, where there is a part where like you can do a phone call, you can send a text and get a positive ID. And while it is never will be as effective as actually hitting the doors and having a face-to-face conversation, it is something that relies on digital tools that absolutely must be integrated with the campaign plan. Calls are so important. They are so important. And you're going to be using tools like ThruTalk, right? To and using tools like Mobilize, right? To have those phone banks, to hold those phone banks. And you're probably all going to be on Zoom, and you're going to be creating campaign culture. This is all things that like a digital director or someone with digital knowledge will likely be in charge of. And that person, if you are a digital director, will likely be you. So I cannot stress this enough. Field, comms, and digital should have a very short feedback loop with each other so you understand the messaging. I specifically work with a lot of district attorney candidates, and it's sometimes very hard to message around decarceral DAs, especially in what tend to be more conservative districts. Or people have the idea that it's challenging. It's not when you have a shorter feedback loop, because you're able to hear the way people are describing their problems or their conflicts that you have policy solutions for on the phone or at the doors. Field is able to come back with that feedback to comms and digital, and then you are able to tailor your messaging and just keep getting it sharper and sharper and sharper with the digital materials that you're putting out for a broad base and the comms materials that you're putting out for earned media. So really, I know Beulah is going to go more into messaging on this, but cannot stress enough how short a feedback loop this should be. number one thing you want to do with your digital game, sort of what I was just referencing before, is layering your communication. Let's say you have an event. You want to make sure that you are hitting, if you have a mobilized phone bank, you want to be blasting out that email to a certain segment. You want to be sending out maybe a text to a certain segment of your list. Let's say it's like a women only, like phone bank. You want to be putting that on, or like a county-wide only phone bank. And it's like a state race, like a gubernatorial race. You want to put that on Facebook. You may want to run ads to that county or specific zip codes. You want to be sending that same phone bank, like mobilized link, to your to that certain segment of your list. And you basically want to be using all the digital tools that you have decided are at your disposal, that you are paying for, right? Because a lot of these things end up being expensive, to really promote every event. And there are a lot of events. I'm going to get to that in a second, how to organize yourself here. But it is so, so important that you keep these things populated, and layer your communication so you are coming at it extremely comprehensively. A lot of people will say, one of the biggest questions I get is like, oh, well, like, I don't really know what to put on my Twitter or my Facebook because we don't have that many events. I promise you do. Like, I promise Field is always doing something, especially if you have a shorter feedback loop. There's earned media to share, there's news to comment on. There is a fundraising deadline, there's a FEC deadline coming up that you want to send an email about. There is something happening in your town, like a car got towed, or like, depending on, like, India Walton just had like a really good example of this, of a moment that she used. Her car got towed. And she's like, I might have gotten a little famous recently, but I am still a poor Black woman living in Buffalo, and I cannot afford this. And like, took a screenshot of it and posted it on Twitter. And that's really good, engaging content. Like, this is why she, won her race. And so, all I would say here is there are opportunities. You just have to keep an eye out for them. If you know there's an event coming down the line, if you know that there's like something as simple as Earth Day or an FEC deadline, or something more complicated like a debate, this is something you should put on your content calendar, and make sure that you have the capacity and like the foresight here to know that this is going to be an email, this is going to be a Facebook post, this is going to be a mobilized link, this is going to need a graphic, and just factor that into your capacity. You may want to run ads on it because you might want to list build. Just really keeping in mind the ladders of engagement that you want people to start climbing on your campaign, and really integrating it with your campaign plan. Finally, almost at the end of my section, you do want to raise money through authenticity. ActBlue is an incredible tool because you split donations and it allows people to fundraise for you. In terms of actually fundraising, just remember that people are not ATMs. You don't want to be hitting people up like 5 times a day. The most you should be hitting someone up is during GOTV, and maybe that's like 2 fundraising emails. 2 fundraising emails in one day, but it's still like a bit dicey. Sorry. Finally, just want to look for opportunities. I love this example. Elizabeth Warren was at a debate in Iowa, but something happened where it got rained out. I forget the exact details. She used it as an opportunity to talk about climate change. And they made a video on the spot, and were really able to just like wrap it up all together and put it on like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and eventually list build off of it, right? There was a petition attached to it when they sent an email being like, sign the petition if you believe that we need urgent climate action now. So again, this is how to start and the key principles. I know that was a sprint. Again, happy to answer any questions at the end. And going to hand it over to Viola for comms.
Thank you. Cool. So I will talk about press and earned media. Are you Erica? Should I just tell you to move the slide? Okay, great. Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm just pulling up my notes. Awesome. Cool. Next slide. So yeah, before you start your campaign, you need to come up with as you're starting your campaign, you want to be developing your core message. And your core message is basically you answering the question, why should you or the candidate vote for you? Next slide. And it's about values. People are going to vote for you because you or your candidate, if you're working on a campaign, have values that actually speak to the people and resonate with what they believe in. Next slide. And in general, voters don't trust politicians. And that's why the candidates really need to connect at a personal level. So they feel like they have one of their own or someone who they really trust representing them, not just another politician who's consistently, inauthentic to them. Next slide. So this is a great example of an example of a campaign video that doesn't talk about the issues, but really connects to the values of the voter. Hit play, please.
Must be lovers while we all fortunes together. I've got some real estate here in my bag.
Bernie Sanders, and I approve this message.
Cool. So what's great about this is he doesn't need to say inclusivity. He just needs to show people from different walks of life. He doesn't need to sort of say unity. He's kind of showing it in the video. So if that's something that resonates with the viewer, it's very, very quick and succinct way of doing so. Could you skip the next slide? So yeah, we can talk about the message. So the message, it's not a 10-point plan or a policy platform, and it's not a slogan. You really want messaging that speaks again to their values. And if they want to know your 10-point plan, then that's a space to have it on your website so you can direct folks to. Next slide. So we're going to go over the 5 C's of campaign message. 1, you want it to be concise. You want it to be clear. You want it to be credible, consistent, and contrasting. Next slide. So your message is basically an argument you're making. You want to think that, let's say you're on doors or you're on the phone. Voters are only really going to listen to maybe 30 seconds or a minute of what you're saying. So saying your messaging needs to be concise means you need to find as little words, but words that are accessible to everyday people to get your message across. and it needs to be clear. This is an example of a statement a candidate made that said, we need to develop alternative transportation modalities. We need bike lanes. It would be a more succinct way of saying, a more clear way of saying that. So short and to the point, and like something that's easily understood by everyone in your voter universe. And this one is, your messaging needs to be credible. Click play, please.
We've got room to put 2,700 people in our jail, and it costs us about $103 a day.
Gerald really doesn't have any hobbies.
Last year's tax rate was 0.4169. This year, we could take that down to 3.838.
So is he always like that?
Yeah, all the time.
Which means that the 3838 is probably going to go somewhere between 3838 and 41.69.
Most people leave their work at the office.
We got 3 light rail cars. You can put 60 people on each car. So even if you add 2 cars,
You're talking about maybe 300 people that are affected. There are a million people in this community. I mean, that is 0.01 to the 8th power. If you round it off, it's 0.
All he wants to do is fix things.
So I got this 18-wheeler that's parked in this neighborhood, fumes all over the place, but quite frankly, it's not a code violation.
You know, I think I like jumping around the house here.
Please re-elect Gerald. Please.
So this is a great example of a candidate who voters can feel very well assured that he knows what he's talking about on the issue of transportation. And yeah, as the candidates, your message, you should be a credible authority on whatever message you're sending out. Maybe it's housing issues, where you or your candidate a housing rights lawyer. You would talk about that history. And I guess in Erica's case, like as the candidate, a former prosecutor, worked in the prosecutor's office, like, and knows how to, like, what they want to change from within or something like that. Yeah, so credibility is as important. And consistent. Next slide. McDonald's has I think it actually eclipsed, but the "I'm loving it" slogan that for decades we associated those 3 words with McDonald's, and they were really, really consistent with it. And contrasting. You're not making an argument in a vacuum. You're making it in contrast to your opponents. So you or your candidate are the progressive who is running to, change the sort of like racist school standards on the school board, versus your other candidate who supported a book ban. Like, you want to be drawing those contrasts during the campaign and with your messaging. So yeah, we'll go through the 5 C's again. Concise, clear, credible, consistent, and contrasting. And then I'm also going to add a few more. You want it to be durable. You want this to be messaging that lasts throughout the campaign. The messaging should also be robust. It stands up to the attacks of the opponents. That goes back to credibility. And it should be resonant. It actually matters to the people who might vote. So that also goes back to the values. And then on developing a media plan and why you should have one. A report found that over 3/4 of people trust local news. They trust newspapers, but 54% blame activists for spreading misinformation, and then only like 36%, which is still a lot, but like not an overwhelming amount, blame journalists. So you want to be getting your message out to the media, because the media is a credible source for a lot of people. I know that's like, and it's been shifting with like fake news, but like generally speaking. Next slide. And I'll talk about the couple differences between what a media advisory is, a press release is, and a media avail. So you want to use a media advisory ahead of an event. So if you're having a fundraiser, if there's going to be a rally where you or the candidate is speaking, if you're holding a press conference, like 4 days or maybe 3 days ahead of the event, you want to send out a media advisory. And then send another one out at the beginning of the day of the actual event. This alerts the news desks to watch for this event, and for them to send folks to cover it. And then you want to do a press release. You would do this after the event. So if the fundraiser went really well, you'd want to send out a candidate raised X number of dollars at this event, and have a picture or video of the candidate speaking. And if there are people who are open to being quoted, you'd include quotes like that. If you recently get an endorsement, a major endorsement, you'd want to send out a press release announcing the endorsement, thanking the endorsing person or endorsee. They can maybe have a quote from them, or definitely a quote from the candidate, thanking them for the endorsement. And then a media avail, if something newsworthy is happening, maybe again a candidate is a school teacher running for state assembly, and then there's a major school related news thing. You want to alert the media that your candidate is available for comment on this issue, and that's a good way of threading them in the public narrative. Next slide. So yeah, before you do anything, you always want to think about why is the candidate running? What is their story? What is their core message, and who is the audience? And so this part is for thinking about you have to get ready for a speaking engagement. You want to have 2 to 3 key messages or talking points that you feel really comfortable with already. Prepare to give maybe 15 to 20 second answers, generally sound bites between 8 and 15 seconds. And you want to frame your issues. It's not just about the 36% of students who don't have computers. It's about the story of that one student who you taught, who really showed a lot of promise, but because they didn't have the resources, they weren't able to do such and such. Something that can help people really create the story and ground the issue in their minds. And then know your opponents, be able to refute or talk about the ways you're contrasted to your opponent. And then you want to keep repeating the message. Next slide. Thanks. Repetition is your friend. While over the course of the campaign, absolutely the story is going to get, the message is going to get old to you. Someone's going to be hearing it for the first time. So don't be afraid to just sort of keep giving them the hits. And when you find one, find a story that really is resonant, you really want to hone in and keep repeating it. And you want to test your message. You don't want to confuse your circle of support for broad acceptance. Talk to people you trust who don't see the same way the world, who don't see the world the same way as you do. And on audition your message, ask for their feedback. You don't want to repeat right-wing talking points, even if to refute them. It's not actually helpful to sort of repeat them, and it actually it does more harm than good to repeat their talking points, because it still increases their audience. Next slide. And you're never what you're not. You always are what you are. So you really want to hone in on the things that make you or your candidate great, and this can happen with trying to refute opponents. You don't want to highlight what you're not. Next slide. So this is Exhibit A, Christine O'Donnell, who is refuting accusations that she's a witch.
I'm not a witch.
I'm nothing you've heard. I'm you. None of us are perfect, but none of us can be happy with what we see all around us. Politicians who think spending, trading favors, and backroom deals are the ways to stay in office. I'll go to Washington and do what you do. I'm Christine O'Donnell, and I approve this message. I'm you.
So yeah, the message that she hoped people would leave with was that she wasn't a witch, but I'm sure most folks were watching it were like, who even like are, maybe you are, or maybe not that she's a witch, but like they're just like, why are they like, it's almost like, why are you making people even like answer this like kind of asinine question? And it directs from her core message. So yeah, you can see in the next slide that it wasn't the best a choice of messaging, as it became a thing that folks honed in on, and you want people to be honed in on your message. So yeah, other examples of times of, we have the the famous "I am not a crook" Trump's clear lie of "I am not a racist." It's just not helpful way of being it's not a consistent message you want to have out. So next slide. And so for tips on handling tough questions, there's a tactic called blocking, and then there's one called bridging. So blocking, it shifts the conversation away from hostile or unimportant territory, and it goes back to what you want the audience to know. So instead of saying, I'm not a witch, you could have just pivoted to no one thinks I'm a witch, clearly, but what I am is a, passionate candidate. Bridging is to transition back to your key point and signal that something important is coming. So some examples of that in the next slide are, saying our opponent would love to distort our record, but here's the truth. Or the corporate interests want to make this about X, but voters are really concerned with Y. And the third, which is one of my favorites, is I can't speak for X, but here's what I can tell you why. And then some tips on TV. For TV, average story length is around 2 minutes. So you want to give 8 to 15 second answers, and don't be afraid to ask to reshoot if you mess up. And don't be afraid to follow up with the reporter afterwards as well. Next slide. When you're on camera, you want to wear comfortable clothes. You want to preferably have solid colors and avoid jewelry that moves when you move. Next slide. Yeah, you want to sit or stand up straight and keep your hands at your sides or on your desk. Like this, having like the hands by the head when you're talking can be really distracting for people when they're watching you, especially if it's such a finite screen. And yeah, keep a pleasant demeanor. And I don't know if you notice this, but a lot of times when people are speaking, they're always like, they keep a smile on their face, because even when they're just like sitting and not saying anything, like this looks more like pleasant than like kind of like a blank face. And for radio, the average segment's around 8 minutes. So you want to give like 30 to 40 second answers. You want to research the host and the guest, especially if they reach out to you. Like you want to sort of know what the environment is that you or the candidate are going into. And you want to smile when you talk. I've started talking now with a smile, and I sound just more smilier. It actually really does come through on the phone. And some final tips are, if you have one, use a landline for phone interviews. And if you're looking at notes while you're speaking, try to keep them at eye level. And yeah, try to stay abreast of the news of the day. And yeah, at the end, you want to let people know where they can find you. Maybe you have like a text to join the campaign, or maybe you have a website that you want to link people to. And yeah, I think that's all. Are there any questions?
Yeah, we have 10 minutes for questions. Thank you, Viola, for speeding through that. No questions on this. Carry yourself with the confidence of a mediocre white man when you go forward and do this. I hope this session, even though it was like totally a sprint, was a good overview of just what a digital program and a comms program should really hit highlight, and the what we should get out of what you should be looking to get out of them if you are a campaign manager, if you are a digital director, if you are a comms director. We do a lot more trainings like this all the time. I know that I'm doing a much longer one specifically for Texas on November 13th, Saturday, November 13th. For anyone that's in Texas, we're doing a bigger campaign management training. Is not women-run campaigns. It is run by the Criminal Justice Department, but a lot of the content is similar, and it's a virtual space. So, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to keep. It's hard to keep track of folks in the chat because I can't drop links as far as I can tell.
So I didn't realize you could even scroll. For a second, I thought they would I haven't seen the chat since 2016. I didn't realize I could. I just learned how to scroll down. Hi, everyone.
Viola, what is our opt-in number? Do you know off the top of your head?
30403.
30403. Okay. So if you text join to 30403, that is the easiest way to get updates from WFP. Beyond that, let me pull up, if you are in Texas, let me pull up the Mobilize training the training that I am doing next month. One moment, please. And this should be coming in the chat. 1 second, I'm going to stop sharing screen. Thanks, Mia. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions?
How do you decide when to respond to an attack or not? That is a really good question. I think one factor, I think it's the credibility-ness of it. I mean, the O'Donnell example was one that she did not need to respond to. I think the timeliness of it, if it's like a small news story far away from the election, I feel like you can sort of move past it. But I feel like if there was a leading up to the election, something that you had four reporters reaching out to you or not, then you want to have a statement. Because I think attacks can just divert a lot of your energy. So just be I think it is something you really want to gauge, especially where in the campaign you are. Is it a fight that will actually benefit you, or are they just kind of trying to waste your time and your energy, protect your energy? When do you acknowledge or address a candidate's run-in with the criminal justice system? I I can take that, or Erica, do you want to?
I mean, we might have different answers. I think it depends what they're running for. I think that, and it depends. I mean, there's a real life example of this. I had a candidate once that had a DUI. We knew it was going to come out, so we prepared for it to come out. We didn't address it directly, but we had talking points prepared. That's actually fairly common. A lot of people have DUIs in the Midwest. So we and that's kind of how we messaged it. It was a mistake. It was a dangerous mistake. He had changed since then, but we just had it prepared, and that's something you should do when you're doing oppo research on yourself. And it does depend. Like, I mean, if you have a candidate that's been incarcerated, then I mean, uh, it depends what they're willing to share. But for me, people who are formerly incarcerated, like I work with a lot of people, a lot of candidates who have been spent time in prison on the inside, and that's a strength, in my opinion, for a lot of the candidates that I personally work with. So it again, it kind of varies situation to situation. I don't know, Viola, if you have more thoughts on this.
Yeah, I agree. I think like have talking points ahead of time is best. And like depending on the candidate and like the constituency, it might actually be more helpful to be like, yeah, this person had run-ins, but like they've changed. This is how they're dedicated to serving their community. At the jump could actually be really really good for a lot of campaigns, depending on I think the voter base.
Yeah, you really want to, as a comms director especially, it is very important you sit down with your candidate and you are like, please, I mean, campaign managers should really be doing this, but if a campaign manager hasn't, a comms director needs to step up and do it and is like, please, let's go through all of the skeletons in your closet, because the last thing you want is like an October surprise, right? For like coming out that you didn't know about. You would, if there is something, like, you need to be prepared for it and just figure it out ahead of time.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's the cover up that kills you.
Mm-hmm. All right, are there any other questions? I'm gonna drop my link. I mean my email in the chat. Or Mira is. But if y'all have any for follow-up questions, feel free to email me or Viola.
Yeah.
You have a district attorney candidate you want to talk about, feel free to email me. Yeah, thank you all so much for joining today. Really appreciate you all and hope that this has been helpful. And it's hard out there, but you have the information that you have all the information and more, especially given your lived experience, to be so successful for anything that you choose to do on a campaign. And just the one thing that I would leave you with is, please don't be discouraged on electoral campaigns or in organizations that are especially like very white, cis, het, male dominated. I know that space is kind of like the water that we swim in. But it's so important that our voices are raised up and that you keep like skill building, so you feel as empowered as you possibly can when you are at the front of the room. You should be.
Yeah. Yeah, you are always more qualified than you think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, everyone enjoy the rest of Netroots.
Mm-hmm. Have a good conference, y'all.